Welcome on into the Wolverine preview show. We're going to preview Michigan versus Washington, primetime on Saturday night, 8 p.m. on ABC. Clayton Sayfie here with Chris Balas. As always, we're presented by Manscaped as well. Use the promo code 20GoBlue at manscaped.com to get 20% off plus free shipping on your order. So a great deal there. Support them, our great partners. Chris, we were in the big house last week. Reported 109,000 fans. I thought it felt more normal, and it felt like we were just back to normal, as opposed to kind of looking around and seeing all the spectacle. Now, I always do that a little bit to an extent, but it felt good. I think it's going to be another electric atmosphere, I think, this weekend here with the night game and all that goes with it.
Can't remember a night game that hasn't had that electric atmosphere, to be honest with you. And you've had the pleasure of sitting outdoors for a few of them, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And we were behind the glass. And I'll tell you what, watching the Denard game, right? The Roy Roundtree game, and behind the glass, I was really jealous of what these people were experiencing out there. My dad said it was one of the most electric atmospheres he's ever witnessed. Can you believe that was 10 years ago already?
Unreal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was literally I've said this, it was the best day of my life, And it's kind of sad because it was a win over Notre Dame in the Brady Hoke era. I wish there were some better days. It also probably says something about my personal life and where my priorities lie. But, that's where I am in life at this point. I lost my voice for like a week. Yes, I was out there. And I hadn't gone to many games at that point in my life either. So to go to that, we stuck around, re-tailgated, set up chairs again after the game at about midnight for a couple hours, let the traffic clear, and enjoyed it with some good people, some family and friends. So that was an incredible game, and there's been numerous. Michigan 7-2 in night games as well. But, yeah, definitely a little bit more fun out in the stands if they win.
Yeah, and no question about it. And that's a big question. You know what? Phil Steele, I think, predicted Washington to win outright, which I thought was pretty interesting. I do know for a fact, and Jim Harbaugh has said this, that Washington's been pointing to this game for basically all summer. This is their season, is the way they viewed it. And they kind of played like it last week, right? Looking past Montana. Granted, Montana, frankly, beat them. Now, Washington made its share of mistakes, but at the same time, Montana got some pressure, I thought, on the quarterback. Washington didn't run all over them like they will try to against Michigan. I guarantee you they're going to try to use that big offensive line to move Michigan's smaller offensive line. We're going to see what happens, how Michigan's line holds up. But I think this is going to be a much tighter game than people think. And I wrote that in staff picks today, which pissed a lot of people off, especially one. And you look at it, though, it's about matchups. And I think Washington on both lines is stout. I remember reading a quote from their offensive line coach in the preseason. He said, we have three lines that could probably start for a lot of schools. Well, they didn't play like it last week. At the same time, when you have no receivers, which they didn't, and I'm not sure, I'll ask you who's coming back for Washington. You've done the preview, and you're able to stack the line a little bit like they did, like Montana did, then you're going to have some issues. So I expect a tough game, Clayton. I expect Michigan to pull this one out. I think the atmosphere is going to go a long way toward helping Michigan in this game. Glad it's not an empty stadium.
Yeah, I agree. And when you're looking at a Washington offense that struggled mightily last season, going up against the crowd noise, a Michigan defense that, I'll say last week they looked like, pretty sharp. I think they knew what they were doing, and they confused Caleb Ellaby a couple times as well. Could have had a couple takeaways. Steve Klingsell this week said they should have had 5. Maybe in every game there's a handful there, and you hope or expect to get a couple of those.
He's a tough grader.
Yeah, exactly as well,
yeah.
Which is good, I think, for these guys. But he's also given them confidence. You could tell they were a more confident group on the back end last week. So, but yeah, when you look at this Washington offense, and speaking of those wide receivers, Dan Rayleigh, the Washington insider I talked to, said that he doesn't think that Rome Odunze is going to miss this game. He's a redshirt freshman. So that's one of their 4 that they have been missing that will come back, but the others probably won't. And they're down to 4 scholarship receivers that have had playing time in their career, including Giles Jackson, who, had a couple catches last week, had a big drop at the end of the game as well. So it'll be his return. Cade Otton is a name to know with the preseason All-American tight end. I think they're going to go to him more. They're going to go to some more heavy sets, which leads me to, he was talking about they went with quite a few 2 and 3 tight end sets last week because of how shorthanded they are at wide receiver. I think we're going to see more numbers at the line of scrimmage for Michigan defensively, maybe not as much of that nickel look that they went with almost exclusively last week, and I think it worked. But you're going to have to put some more guys in there. When you do that, sure, you have some better numbers up there, but those guys still have to perform. And you mentioned the offensive line. There's a lot of talent on this Washington offensive line. Jackson Kirkland, the left tackle, is an All-American. The center is, I think, a seventh-year senior who has been all Pac-12 multiple times. Then they have a solid right tackle. They've kind of had a revolving door, it looks like, at the guard spots. But what do you expect out of this Michigan defense? I think it's going to look quite a bit different than it did last week.
Without a doubt. And Mike McDonald's told us that. Michigan's defensive coordinator said it's going to be a week-to-week thing. What we see one week is not going to be how you see us play the next week. And let's be honest and let's be clear. Michigan's been preparing for Washington too, and we'll have a little bit more on that in Inside the Fort today, coming up shortly. But it's one of those things where you look at Michigan, Wisconsin, and everybody still plays that game. Well, look what Wisconsin didn't do against Penn State. And, it's been that way the last 2 times Michigan and Wisconsin have played, okay? Other teams have been able to slow them because they are more stout up front. Let's be honest. Michigan's defensive line was a sieve in those 2 games. And we don't know, honestly, because, like you said, we saw 2 guys with their hands in the ground basically last week when Michigan played Western Michigan, and you had everybody else standing up. There were a couple times they brought in 3, but you're right. They were a nickel for basically that entire game because that's what needed to happen. So we're going to see if this defensive line can hold up the bend but don't break thing, and how much Washington tests them on the ground is going to be fascinating to me, how much push they get. I didn't think the Michigan offensive line got a whole lot of push against Western Michigan, and watching the film with Doug Skeen and Jumbo Elliott, by the way, a Michigan All-American in the Collegiate Hall of Fame, said the same thing on Twitter. He said, hat on a hat, but certainly not domination. And against a team like that, you should be pushing those guys off the ball. And they weren't. They were engaging. So that's another thing that I'm going to be interested in, is how is Michigan going to do against this Washington defensive line? That defense of theirs played pretty well last week. Granted, it was Montana. It was the first game. They've got some good corners. Losing Ronnie Bell is going to be huge. So, in my opinion, who's going to step up for him? That's another big one. So we're going to have to see what happens.
Yeah, and you mentioned their corners. I wanted to talk about that as well. They're not good corners. They're great corners, and one of them's elite in Trent McDuffie, who has been compared to some of these other Washington greats that they've had. And they've been really good at pumping out corners, the last decade plus, and really good defense. Washington has gone 66 straight games without allowing 35 or more points, the longest such streak in the nation. So this is a program, not just a team, but a program that prides itself on defense. I think it's going to be tough for Michigan to score in this game. And you have to note that Washington turned it over 3 times, as you kind of mentioned earlier, in that last game. That makes the defensive performance they had against Montana only allowing 13 points. And, I know it's Montana, it's an FCS school, but if they win 48-13, no one's batting an eye at the 13. It just happened to be 13-7 when they also face short field position, tough field position spots after turnovers. So this is a good defense. I think, Michigan's offense is going to have to open it up, and you wrote this in your keys to the game, and I completely agreed with turning the page on the playbook because, last week they wanted to run. Cade McNamara was 9 for 11, extremely efficient day. He had a couple touchdowns, one of them on a swing pass to Blake Corum. But I think they're going to have to do more. And speaking of the Ronnie Bell injury, Dalen Baldwin, who seems to be a little bit more healthy, Cornelius Johnson, who wasn't that involved in the offense last week, Roman Wilson, A.J. Henning, all these guys are going to have to step up because Ronnie Bell looked like he was on another level last week, and I think it's going to be tough to replace him. So you have to note that and, realize that this is a tough test going up against that secondary.
Yeah, without a doubt. And to me, you don't, like I wrote earlier in the week, there's no replacing Ronnie Bell, right? You've got to have, it might be a by committee thing. This is not a case where Derek Alexander goes down 30 years ago. Desmond Howard steps in and wins the Heisman Trophy. The guys behind him are solid. They're good receivers. They aren't great receivers. And Ronnie Bell, frankly, looked like he was about to take that step and toward becoming a great receiver. Granted, it was Western Michigan, but the one-handed catch, the moves he made, the routes he ran, things like that, to me, he was ready to be an all Big Ten receiver. So I don't think that there's another guy on this roster that is really in position to do that. I think Cornelius Johnson, we did hear at times that he was the best receiver in camp, which was great to hear. So can he step in and fill that void? He's going to have to. Somebody is. But I want to see schemes designed to get these receivers open. We didn't see a ton of separation, frankly, again, in watching the film, other than Ronnie Bell, among the receivers. So can they maybe get some of that with the tight ends, with Eric All, with Luke Schoonmaker, who they said has improved dramatically. It's up to Josh Gaddis, Michigan's offensive coordinator, to really scheme things now that Ronnie Bell is out, because they're going to need that deep threat. Maybe it's Andrell Anthony. Maybe he comes out of nowhere as a true freshman and gets a couple over the top. People were talking about him. Jim Harbaugh was talking about him in the fall, getting a big play every day. So, but it's going to be tough. I hope that we see an offensive line that gives Cade McNamara time. I hope that we see a little bit of success in the running game. They won't win if they don't. If Cade's got to throw 45 times, they aren't going to win this game. Or if they do, it's going to be something like 14-13. So here's hoping that this offense is better than I expect it to be, frankly, on Saturday night.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about Manscaped real quick. Autumn is in the air. The pumpkins are in the patch. And our friends at Manscaped are here to make sure you don't carve your pants pumpkins when you're grooming, if you know what I'm saying. Make sure you keep things fresh this fall with the leaders in male grooming in their brand new 4th-generation performance package. Boys, get ready for a cuffing season like no other, ready to take the leap into fall with Manscaped. Then you can join the 2 million men worldwide, including us, 2,000,002 men worldwide, using Manscaped by going to manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping using the promo code 20GoBlue. That's our exclusive promo code, so make sure to use that to give us the credit there to get you the 20% off. So that is manscaped.com using the promo code 20GoBlue. Make your balls a priority this fall. Choose Manscaped. Your balls will thank you, and so will other people in your life as well. So make sure to go and do that. Chris, they've been sending us all these products, and they're just fantastic.
We chuckle, but you know what? It's the dialogue, fellas. The product is fantastic. It really is, and we wouldn't promote it if it weren't, to be honest with you. So, but man, whoever is doing the writing for them is doing one hell of a job, because last time it took 6 takes. To your credit, 1 take this time, and again, but a great product, and we are proud to have them as a sponsor.
Absolutely. So I want to talk mentality here when it comes to this game, because, you've seen the story before at times, including last year, where, and there's so many parallels to last season when you have a Michigan team that went on the road and beat a ranked Minnesota team. Now, it wasn't as good of a Minnesota team as we thought at the time, potentially, playing a Michigan State team that turned it over, 6 times against Rutgers, who got their first Big Ten win since 2017. And you come in. Then I thought Michigan came in overconfident. Now, it also wasn't as good of a Michigan team as we thought. So, they were favored by nearly 30 points or something like that. They should not have been. But, we didn't have a bunch of sample size to go off of there. When you look at Washington, I think you either are going to get a pissed off team ready to, turn their season around after an embarrassing loss to Montana, or you could get a Washington team that lays down, doesn't want to be there. They made the long trip. It's a night game, all of that. And, and then on the Michigan side of things, you could get a team that comes in a little overconfident. They better not after what happened last season.
Right.
You beat Western Michigan. You were supposed to. I know you doubled the spread and all of that, but, you were supposed to do what you did last week. So I guess where do you think both teams are going to come in? And by the way, to note this as well, just to not to be the Debbie Downer, but all 6 ranked FBS teams to have lost to an FCS team, including 2007 Michigan. I hate to mention that, but I have to because it's relevant. Have made a bowl game. So, that means that it's not a big amount of data, but that means that teams that have an embarrassing loss like this have traditionally bounced back to have at least okay season. So I guess where do you think both teams are going to come in on the mentality front?
Yeah, I think Washington comes in frothing at the mouth because they understand this is their season now, and this is the only way to earn respect back is to go into the big house and beat Michigan. Then you can say that first game was a fluke, right? And it just was one of those things. We didn't have our receivers. We were overlooking Montana to look at Michigan, and I think they're going to be ready to play. I really do. I think this is like you said, it's a program. It's a solid program. They've given Michigan all they can handle over the years, going back to way before you were born, and when Michigan's been favored. I put on about with Michigan. I put on there, I think 3 or 4 instances in staff predictions where they looked really good in their opener, and their opponent, a big time team, maybe didn't look so good, and then in week 2 the script was reversed. Notre Dame got them a couple of times after they looked like crap. You look at Washington; they came in 1984. I was at that game. I was probably 14 years old, and Michigan had just beaten Miami of Florida, and number one Miami of Florida were riding high. Washington smashed them. They came in, and Michigan didn't even score until late in the game. So a touchdown until late in the game. So, but I don't think you're going to see this Michigan team overlooking these guys because, again, all summer they've been pointing to a 4-0 start as really one of the keys to gaining momentum and confidence, knowing that their slate is really tough. Their Big Ten slate. You got to go to Wisconsin. You got to go to Nebraska. I don't care what anybody says. It's going to be tough there. It's not, I would imagine the future odds on that game or the spread is probably about 5 or 6. It opened at 2.5. But I'm telling you, that's going to be a tough environment. And Penn State, so they understand that they needed to win these first 4 games, and that includes Rutgers too, which is a much improved team, before going to Wisconsin. And you talk about no moral victories, number one, and I'm looking ahead a little bit, but I think if you look at this Wisconsin or this Washington team and how big they are on both lines, I think it's kind of a precursor to what you're going to see with Wisconsin, who didn't look all that good against Penn State, frankly. But each week is different. So I expect Michigan to come in very fired up. I expect Washington to come in very fired up with something to prove. I think it's going to be an ugly, low-scoring game, frankly. I think you're going to see a lot of punts. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a good defensive battle. I don't trust after watching Washington's game, a little bit live while we were working here after Michigan's game and then rewatching most of it earlier this week. I just don't trust that offense to come in and score more than 20 points. That's where I have them, and we'll do our final scores here. And I have Michigan scoring 28. Even that's going to be tough.
Yep.
Because, again, this is a Washington defense that only allowed 13 points. I know it's to an FCS team, but they're playing, with no semblance of complementary football with that offense that turned it over 3 times. So I'm just a little more confident in Michigan coming into this game. That's why I have them winning 28-20. Chris, I know you're 24-20, but I guess just real quick synopsis. We talked last week even, just at, seeing each other, being coworkers, and you said that you had some real concerns about this Washington game, and we're probably leaning that Washington would come in and win. I guess you have Michigan as a slight victor in this game. What, I guess encourages you after seeing both teams last week that makes you kind of flip a little bit? And I know your prediction wasn't set in stone or anything because obviously we hadn't seen either team play a game.
Right, exactly. I thought, again, the lines were going to be a matchup problem for Michigan, and I didn't see a whole lot. Maybe in the Washington game that changes my mind a little bit. They didn't play well together. They've got parts. They should have been better than they were. With Michigan, again, I didn't see enough of the defensive line to know how they were going to hold up against Washington's big front. I don't know how Michigan's offensive line, especially, is going to do against Washington's big front. So that to me was the big concern and the big question mark there. And you can't look at scores. You can't do the transitive property thing and say, oh, they did this to this game, so this is going to happen here. It's not about that. It's about matchups. And we've seen that year after year after year after year, and people just generally don't learn from it. So that's not how this works. So that to me is why I predicted the low scoring game and why I thought Washington could come in here and spring the upset. I still think that's possible. Would love to be nothing more than to be proven wrong. To be abundantly clear, it is good for us, and I am an alum. So you know what? I don't root against Michigan. Let's put it that way. Just so I don't root for them to lose. It's good for business when they win, and definitely want to see them go out and play a complete game. I want to see them get better. I want to see more drive from the offensive line. I want to see a little more pressure on the quarterback than from somebody other than Aiden Hutchinson. So, all things considered, again, a great opener for Michigan. We've seen it before, though. Let's see what happens in game 2.
And I'll say at the same time, we've seen great Michigan openers followed up with great Michigan second games as well.
Yep.
So that's certainly possible. And the people that say it's negative or whatever, the talking points this week are naturally going to be pumping the brakes if we feel that's the case, because Washington lost to an FCS team and Michigan won big against a MAC team they were supposed to beat. We both have Michigan winning, so you have to keep that in mind as well. Hope everybody enjoys the game on Saturday. Extended tailgate for those that'll be, in town, and then for the people watching at home, they'll get to catch some of those earlier games before the 8 p.m. kick. I guess it's actually 8:14, so it's going to be a late night for us. But man, this is what you live for. So we are, excited for this night game. Yeah, a little bit, but it'll be.
I'm getting older, man. I like my sleep.
No, it'll be interesting, but it will be fun, and we'll see what the Wolverines can do against the Huskies. 8 p.m. on ABC. Keep it locked at thewolverine.com for all of your pregame, in-game, and post-game coverage, and we'll see you over there.